The heart just reach hard topics, but the truth we speak. Oh yeah. Black men speak. Turn it up. Let the truth run deep. Oh yeah. From the barbershop chair to the back row seat. You feel what we feel, then repeat. Then repeat. Black men speak. Talk faith, talk pain. Talk pride, talk father, talk sons by our side. Every story that they said was weak, you gon' hear us talk on. Black men speak, turn it up, let the truth run deep. Say it, from the barbershop chair to the back row seat. If you feel
Well, welcome to Black Men Speak, a podcast that highlights ordinary Black men doing extraordinary things. I'm your host, Keith Dent. And in this episode of Black Men Speak, we're going to explore the lived experience of biracial Black men. Raised in environments where Black culture, community, and mentorship were limited or completely absent. From identity confusion to delayed self-discovery, we unpack how isolation impacts confidence, masculinity, and belonging. This conversation goes beyond personal stories to examine the systemic realities behind father absence, cultural disconnection, and the gaps we must now fill. Our guest today will talk about this issue because he's written us with a great story. It was called Wakanda in the Rain Shadow, Mentoring Biracial Black Men in the Pacific Northwest. He's an industrial-organizational psychologist, try to say that real fast, based in West Seattle, and the founder of Puget I, an independent consulting practice that integrates organizational development with diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies. His work supports a wide range of clients in building more inclusive, effective, and resilient workplaces. With careers spanning Houston, Portland, Seattle, and London, Dr. Clay brings a global perspective to his practice. Since 2006, he has been deeply committed to mentoring young men, fostering meaningful relationships across communities on both sides of the Atlantic. He previously served as the DEI officer for the Mechanical Engineering Department at the University of Washington, which he told me it's UW, that's how they pronounce it, where he spent 3 years advancing equity-focused initiatives. Dr. Clay is a proud U.S. Army veteran, bringing the values of leadership, service, and discipline into his professional and community efforts. So, Dr. Clay, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Keith. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. So before we get into our questions, in your article about the Pacific Northwest, specifically Portland and Seattle and Vancouver, you mentioned these cities seen as places that are different, and I quote, different, not post-racial, but somehow more expansive, meaning more room to breathe. So could you set the scene for our audience, especially those who may not know the Pacific Northwest very well? What's the state kind of a Black America in those cities?
Sure. And thank you for that question. Thank you so much, Keith, as well. I lived in Portland first, Portland, Oregon. The history of Portland, very racist history. They didn't allow Black people to live there. I don't think that book got stricken off the laws until 2001. And then went to Vancouver for my PhD and settled in Seattle. The Pacific Northwest, I'm also a military veteran. I love the outdoors. So if you're an outdoorsman like myself, I don't think I'm an outdoorsman, but I like to hike.
Okay. Yeah.
I like getting
That's,
out
hey,
there.
that's outdoors. That's
Yeah,
outdoors.
exactly. It's a gorgeous place. We talked earlier about the islands. You have the San Juan Island. You have Vancouver Island. Places like Friday Harbor. So there is something growing up in Houston, Texas, which is a city. If there is a city, very flat. Being able to go out in the woods, there's something psychological about that for me to where I'm out. Like sometimes when I'm hiking in Victoria, British Columbia, I'm literally out in the middle of nowhere with a buck knife, just in case something goes down with the bear or something. But I think there's a communal aspect to that because, um, there aren't a lot of Black people here either. And so places that I've been before, like I'm trying like not to like be some sort of trailblazer, but for me, there is an openness there. There's an expansiveness there. I'm not saying there isn't racism here because there definitely is in the big cities like Portland, Seattle. I don't really head east of Seattle. Like I don't really go to Spokane and places like that. It's not a knock. It's just that that's not my energy because there's been
Mhm.
racist incidents that have happened there. Um, but yeah, having lived in Vancouver, British Columbia as well, like I can say that out of these three cities, as a Black man, I've gotten nothing but opportunities. I'm also a Black man, a PhD, veteran, stuff that you mentioned. So when people see me, like, oh, like we're getting a veteran, we're getting XYZ, we're getting someone who can come in and do this. That's why I got the job at University of Washington. So I'm coming in with credentials.
Mhm.
And what I realize, if you are a Black man with certain credentials, all the Black guys I mentioned in my running club earlier, the Black guys that I work with, they're all working for Amazon or Boeing or Starbucks. So I'm not saying that's for everybody, but there is a culture here of progressivism, and if you are a Black person with certain credentials, you can kind of just fit in. Once again, I'm not saying it's perfect. My
Mhm.
friends have incidents at work, microaggressions. That stuff is going to be there. So to answer your question, there's a physical aspect of being here, which I enjoy about the Pacific Northwest. There's a professional aspect of it as well too, and I think it's a place that I think every Black person should experience. And my final point is, even a place like Salt Spring Island. For anyone watching, Google and research Salt Spring Island because it's this amazing little island in Vancouver, British Columbia, where a lot of Black families settled that were
Mhm.
able to escape many of the elements of chattel slavery. And so there's an openness here, but there's also a freshness for a place like this, especially
Mhm.
for someone like me who grew up in the South.
Okay, great. So one of the things that I found fascinating about the article, I mean, because for the most part, and maybe, and I don't know if it's an East Coast thing, but back in the day, if there was someone that was biracial, they had a certain stigma, pretty Ricky, or it's they're almost like kind of upper echelon or upper
Yeah.
tier, or they get special privileges, because they're almost seen as white. And I mean, not that they wouldn't get criticized in the Black community, but that was kind of the thing, that they were different, but kind of a good different, where they got
Yeah.
special treatment. But in your article, it talked about some of the challenges that biracial men or young men had, and you really featured a young man that you were working with. So my question really was, so what are some of the growing up in the white space, especially in the Northwest, how did it shape how biracial Black men understand their identity?
Sure. I'll answer that question. Now, me personally, I'm someone who I consider myself African American, but through my mentoring, this kind of evolved. And even though it's conjecture, I realized after mentoring about 50 young men, like, wow, I'm mentoring a lot of young biracial men, and it was the same thing, like the white mother and the Black father. I think some of that might have to do with where I'm at, especially here in Seattle, with the military base Fort Lewis, and some men coming here, coming to stay, coming to visit. They might get somebody pregnant, or they have, and then they either get transferred somewhere else. So that's something that evolved from this. But the demographic landscape of the Pacific Northwest, particularly in places like Portland and Seattle, it creates this sort of unique environment where interracial families are not only common, but they're highly visible because there aren't a lot of Black people here, especially in Portland. But you have more Black people in Seattle. But compared to like a Houston or an Atlanta, it doesn't compare. And so you have this thing, this sort of visibility paradox where, I have, interracial couple friends in Houston and Austin, and because you have more Black people there, like no one really sort of cares. But in a place here, like it's more conspicuous because you don't have a lot of Black people here in the first place. And so here, like the identity becomes something that you have to figure out, not inherit. I grew up in the South. I grew up with, a Black mother, Black grandparents, a Black father who was a preacher, but he didn't raise me. But I still was raised around Black people. And so what I've seen here is the opposite. You have a young man who might have a Black father and a white mother that's doing a good job raising them, but their dad's family's down in Memphis or wherever. And so they might not have that family. And without that family, you don't have that same community. So instead of like absorbing it passively like I did, you actively have to construct it. And they're doing that through trial and error. And so they're having to sort of figure things out on their own without like someone like me, or where it's just natural. Like it's just osmosis. That's what Papa does. That's what Mama does. That's what Uncle Ron, whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're navigating these spaces where socially that they're Black, they've been told they're Black. An incident might have happened that reinforced that. Like not only are you're Black, it's usually something that I've dealt with where it's like you're Black, but also something negative happened to reinforce like, you're not biracial. Your mom might be white, but you're Black. And that's why. And then by the time I get to them, like the trauma points already happened. And now I'm trying to mentor them where they've had to deal with some element of trauma. And they ended up like somebody reached out to me. Now I'm mentoring this young man. And so the first, element of them being Black was something negative. And that's not a good feeling. Like, and I just like, I grew up like as a little kid, like, went to a Black elementary school. Everything was good. But same thing even happened to me without being biracial. But I remember when I got to middle school, oh, that's when the little, white kids would call me the N-word, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And so it's that sort of these young men that I've been mentoring over the past several years that belonging and trying to feel, they feel, conditional, but not in both worlds. I'm raised by my white mom. I got my white grandparents, but I'm still different. And if I go back to Memphis or wherever to visit my uncles and aunts, I'm cool here, but I'm still like, I got to go back home to Seattle, And so it's just that constant confusion. And so it's like being unsettled in yourself. And so, yeah, I think over time that can shape how their confidence grows, how they grow as young men. And by, like I said, at the time I get to them, I'm trying to like reinforce, like, you're good. Like there's nothing wrong with you. And also trying to sort of pull them out of that trauma space that, you got called the N-word in the third grade. And you're like, wait a minute, I thought I was like everybody else, but you're not like everybody else.
Right. So
go ahead.
So in essence, they felt like aliens, but then they didn't even know what an alien was.
Exactly. Like they felt like they felt fine because they were just little Jimmy until something happened that reinforced, no, you're little Jimmy, but you're also different. And that difference came through in a negative aspect. Right.
And one of the I mean, for the young men that are biracial, their skin color almost was close or similar to the people that he lived with or lived around. So to be called those certain things just because of a skin color, I'm sure was very traumatizing.
Yeah, and traumatizing to the point to like a lot of the people that reach out to me do it through like a network of individuals that I might know. Hey, and I can't say yes to everybody either. Like I live in West Seattle. If Johnny lives up in North Seattle, I'm not driving up there. And it's not to be me. I might meet him through Zoom, but it's just like, and so the mothers are also like trying to like, and most of the mothers I've dealt with, they're trying. They wouldn't have reached out to me unless they weren't trying, but it's like they don't have the tools either to like, how do I help this young man? And they know what they don't know. Like they know that this young man probably needs some sort of Black male role model. But how do they go about doing that, and so, and also, and I hate to say this, but through my mentorship, Keith, my mentorship is temporary. Like I have a game plan. Like this young man that I'm working with now, they're about to graduate high school, go off to college. At that point, I stop. I can't mentor you forever.
Mhm.
And I've gotten some, some hurt feelings from that, not just from young men, but from parents. But I'm like, I'm doing this to give you a set of tools to go out there. You just got into college, you got into the military, et cetera, et cetera. But I can't be your father. And I know, and that might come off as harsh, but that's sort of the way it has to be as far as I'm concerned, because I'm not
Right.
your father.
Right.
So that's part of the game as well.
So what would you say were the kind of the two or three things that the young men felt that they were lacking you that they really needed your help with?
The two things I would say for the most part have been that sense of self. Like, who am I? I inhabit this body. Society's telling me I'm black, but I know nothing, quote unquote, black, except for, like certain elements of music and history. But like I'm like, no, there's more than just music and history. There's theater, there's theater arts, there's art, there's so many other things. Like,
Mm,
let me hit you up. Like, have you heard of Stevie Wonder? You know what I'm saying? Have you heard about
wow.
Nat Turner? And a lot of them, I would say that the Seattle Public School District does a decent job, but yeah, like these young men have not heard of James Baldwin by the time I get to them. That's one of the first people I peeped them
Mm,
on. So the number one thing is just that sense of self. And number two is something that I have never experienced as an African American man, but just that need to be around your people. Some of them might have their boys, but I mean they're at school. But when you go back to the neighborhood, your friend might live in Lakewood, your homeboy might live East Seattle, wherever the case may be.
mhm.
So it's just like that. Something that I had growing up was like I had Chris across the street. I can go play with Chris, Transformers, GI Joes, whatever. They didn't really have that, or so it's that sense of self that they don't have, but also just sort of that sense of belonging. And like I said, like for me, it was natural. Like I grew up the way I grew up, but for them, just not knowing who they are at that age. I knew at
Right.
16 at 16 I was captain of the football team, yada yada yada. But they're still like trying to figure it out because they're in a space to where society tells them one thing, you are black, you are African American, and yet they're like, well, I don't know what that means, type of situation, and that's
Well,
a weird dichotomy.
but that's fascinating to me because I would think that, well, my question would be, is it because now that it's kind of a awakening of that, yes, I am African American, that they feel they have to gravitate towards that? Or does the society or the area in which they're living kind of push them to that, because now the friends that they've had when they were in elementary school or middle school no longer um, feel that they could keep them in their circle? And I just find that interesting.
Yeah, a lot of it is society, and a lot of it, I would think that it's something like President Obama. President Obama was born of a white mother and an African father, but society tells him he's a black male, African American, whatever the case may be. It's that same thing. It's like, you're representing as one thing, but and it's not to like I read Obama's book. There was probably like from what his book said, something about my father. Like there was a lot of confusion there because you're a black man, or you're being told you're a black man being raised by a white mother, but you don't know how to quote unquote be black. And so it's difficult. And even though you can get things from society, those
Mhm.
same things that you're getting from society can also tear you apart. Like, you're getting like, yeah, you're integrated, you're part of the system, et cetera, but hey, Jimmy, you can't come and tell me. Like one young man told me that he went to go visit his friend's grandmother's house one day, and this was here in Seattle, and his grandmother was like, well, everybody can come inside except for him.
Mm.
And he was just like, and not to go into the colorism part, this is a light-skinned, 14-year-old young black man. And, I was already mentoring him, but that really threw him off psychologically. He's just like, because that's something you would think about we might have grew up with like in the 80s or 90s. even though even then I wouldn't say to that extent, but to be told that everybody can come inside except for you, that's something that
Oh, that's
met,
jarring. Oh yeah, no, that
yeah,
messes with you. Especially he's there with his friends. It's not like he
yeah,
wasn't invited to come.
yeah. And they, and it was his friends that, like I said, one of them had their permit and they drove to a certain part of Washington. And so not only is he like jarred, he's being told that he can't come inside the house.
Right.
So like, what is he going to do? Is he going to sleep in the car? Like, so he's just like
Mm.
all types of confused. And the good thing is his friends were like, cool, like, sorry, grandma, we didn't know you were acting like this. And they drove back from wherever they were to Seattle. But that caused some damage to that young man. And that's another thing I hate to say too, Keith, is that for someone like, for us, like I dealt with stuff like that and I was resilient enough to shake it off. Yeah, I grew up in Texas and I had people would say stuff, weird stuff to me growing up, but
Oh, same.
this really like, yeah, this set him back like months. Like, that lady told me I couldn't come inside. And the confusion and the anger and the bitterness and the whole community got around it and kind of, his mother had a talk with the other mother, yada, yada, yada. But yeah, that resilience, that's what I worked with him on. Like, hey man, you're gonna have to have a thick skin too. Like you're gonna have to realize like you can't let this set you back. But
Mm.
once again, my lived experience is different from him. At 14, 15, that was like a hammer to the head.
Wow. Wow. And and you said the young man you said 16?
He was 14 when it happened.
14. Okay, gotcha. But there's so much, I guess, media, and there's so much things they have access to just in general. I just wonder, and maybe, do you feel that because things are so, I guess, not as overt as it used to be, that the kids aren't as resilient as they used to be?
Yeah, I think from the ones I've dealt with, and even working at the university, they think that they're tough until something like that happens. Like, especially some of the young men I've mentored to where there was an incident that happened at a basketball game, and some of the young people were like, and once again, this is like the Pacific Northwest. Again, this happened down in Portland. So I'm never going to try to make sure this place is like, this is not a utopia whatsoever. But yeah, it's the same thing. Like, incident at a basketball game where some people were like yelling the N word at him. And yeah, it threw him off. And so, I played football in high school in Texas. I graduated high school in 1995. We used to go to different cities, and yeah, that's something that should. And not saying it was right, but it's like, oh, we're
Mm.
going down to El Campo, Texas. Get ready to get some N words served at you. And it was just kind of like, for us, it was like, yeah, it was built into the system, sadly, and we
Oh,
shouldn't have just accepted it. But it was also
but
growing
you
up
knew it
in the
was there.
90s. Yeah, it was there. It was, I mean, I grew up, Confederate flags, yada, yada, yada. These young men, and I'm not trying to knock them. That's why I've been doing this for like 20 years on and off. But I do think that this young generation from, say, that was born around, yeah, 2011, 2012, the ones that are hitting like 14, 16, there's like, I'm also a military veteran,
Mhm.
so I'm
Yeah.
gonna look at everybody a little bit tougher. But like, yeah, like you got to buck up, man. Like you can't let that get you down, or the yeah, you just can't like, or something you see on the internet. This one young man saw something on the internet, and it was like it really got to him. I'm like, dude, that's not real. I mean, it's real what happened, but you gotta like realize like if you're gonna be that soft and not trying to be mean about it or try to be, but yeah, sometimes I have to be Dr. Corey, Mr. Army Corey too. Like
Mhm.
you gotta have some resilience because if this makes you like this, the world's gonna eat you alive.
Right. Right. So, and that kind of leads to my next question. So, what role does proximity, or kind of the lack of proximity to Black fathers and community, play in shaping the confidence of these, I guess, young men?
Yeah, I think that proximity provides a mirror. Like you need a template. Like my template was my grandfather, but that absence definitely creates a question mark. So seeing some sort of Black father figure is going to give you at least a reference point. Like I am like my grandfather. I am a big, goofy, stoic Black man. That was my reference point growing up. My grandfather did a good job to step in for my father, born in the 1930s, was in the Air Force, but he saw some stuff. He saw some stuff growing up in Yoakum, Texas. He's like one day I was telling Papa that me and my wife were driving from Houston to Austin, and he was like, "Well, this is about 10 years ago. Be careful, don't get pulled over in such and such town." I'm like, "Well, why are you telling me that?" He's like, "Well, that's a sundown town." I'm like, in his mind, because at this time he was getting older, I'm like, yeah. So some of that stuff he gave me also made me hyper vigilant. Um, so yeah, but being around those different, perspectives, that creates like a feedback loop. Like I'm not my grandfather, but he gave me certain tools. And I think that proximity, like I said, provides a template. And I think having a community, reinforces what one parent can't do alone. My uncle stepped in, my auntie stepped in, my grandparents did an amazing job, and my mother kicked ass too. My mom has two children. We both have PhDs. We're both doing well. And I think that's that sort of proximity of being around Blackness, but also being around Blackness to where I don't like that term tiger mom, but my mom was like, yo, 18, you better be in the military, you better be in college, you ain't gonna be here.
Right.
So she was just
Right.
like, those were me and my sister's options. And so there was no coddling, like we didn't, we went to school, we did our stuff. Like my sister excelled academically, I excelled with sports. But that community, once again, where we lived at in Richmond, Texas, Rosenberg, Texas, provided a space. And that feedback loop is like, yeah, I'm going to be good because if I'm not good here, Miss Sister Baby gonna tell my mama gonna tell my grandma. So it's like that proximity creates like that, that village that we need.
Right. Right.
And I think without that proximity, when identity isn't consistent, and that's what I see with a lot of these young men, if that identity of self isn't consistent, it just causes confusion. You have to have that sense of identity, and that builds a sense of self-worth, and then that's how you build your self-esteem. And so, when you mention that proximity, if you don't have that, and that's what I see with these young men, many of them don't have that, or they get it very tangentially to where they're not able to build their self-esteem because, you go to you go visit your dad once a year down in Dallas, for 6 days, then you come back to Seattle, you're only getting,
you forget it all.
Yeah. Yeah. You get like you're getting some of the icing off the cake, but you're not getting the cake. And so, if you're not around elements of Black excellence, and it doesn't have to be Black excellence, but if you ain't around your people sometimes, like you don't know who you are. Like I know that there are certain places I can go in Houston, Texas. I don't have hair, but I can still go and be with my people. But I can still do that in Seattle too. There's a barbershop right up the road. I can still go be with my people, but to be with your people and be natural around them, if you don't have that, like you and I can speak naturally as men. You know what I'm saying? Some cats, I've dealt with some young men who don't have that. And that's weird to me. But then I also realize, well, if they weren't raised around it, if they weren't around that proximity, then they don't know how to, it's like any other creature. Like if you're not like that little creature, that little monkey in Japan. I'm just saying, like, his mom rejected him and he's having to learn like how do I get love? If you're not in the proximity of love and around your people, it's hard. And it's also what I realized, Keith, like for some of them, once they do get it, it's hard to accept it. I hugged a young man one day and it threw him off. And I was just like, and he just said, like, real talk, Corey, a Black man's never hugged me before. I'm like, I didn't, and it's like, damn, like that threw me off,
Right.
Because, it was just like, man, like, at least my grandfather, my uncle, even my dad and I didn't get along, but he would hug me like in an aggressive way, hug me, hit me in the back.
Yeah.
If you never had that, if you were never around that, it comes off as alien.
Yeah. So, and I know I didn't think about this, but I'm going to just shift to the moms for a minute. So when the moms, I guess, come to you, I'm sure there's kind of a debrief or a beginning session you may have just to get some backstory. Do the community of moms that have had biracial relationships, do they feel they're also isolated because of maybe how they were treated, or is it not really a big deal?
It's two camps here in the Pacific Northwest. It's not a real big deal, but like the case of the young man with the grandma, those parents were different animals. So for many of the young women, the mothers, it's not a big deal. They're single moms. They're doing the best they can. Um, but I have to be honest too. There are some of these we mentioned the military base, uh, and there were some of the guys would come up from Fort Lewis, come to Seattle, and party, and some of the women would go down there and party, et cetera, et cetera. And so I've had to have. I try not to talk to the moms, but I did have to have this one conversation with the mom because she was bringing a young man around her son that was a bad influence. And I just had to have like, yo, like if you want me
Mm,
mentor, I can't tell you who to date. That's your personal life. But everything I'm doing that this person you're bringing around your son, he's just cutting that off at the knees. So make a choice. Like, and actually I just took myself out of that situation because
right.
she was dealing with her own stuff. That's rare, honestly. Most of the moms, they have gotten to a point to where they want someone to do that mirroring thing. Like, can you please help me, or give me some sort of tools or techniques to work with, or something has happened to where like this one mother came to me. This was in Portland, same situation. The young man was playing basketball at the basketball court. He was 15, and the neighbor across the street called the police. And so he was like, what's going on? One thing led to another. They reached out to me. I worked with the young man for about six months. He was good to go after that. So yeah, most of the moms are in a good space because, like I said, and it's not all. Like I also just
Hmm.
mentor like young black men too, that aren't biracial.
Right, right.
But it's the same thing. Like most of the women they wouldn't reach out to me unless they're trying, or if they're not at their wits end, or they're like, look, I've tried everything, but as a mother, like there are certain things that I can't do. And it's not a knock. Like I don't, like my mom experienced that. Like there are certain things when I was 15, 16, where even though my dad and I didn't get along, like, I spent some time with him, or my grandfather would come straighten me out. But yeah, by the time it gets to me, the moms are usually at their wits end or looking for some sort of tool to kind of help them.
Right. Because I guess around that age, 15, 16, the kids are already, they're being bombarded not only with the hormones and everything else. They're also kind of, you're really trying to identity, trying to just even, then that's all men, all young men, just
Yeah,
trying to
yeah.
identify who they are. And so that just adds an extra layer to
Yeah, I remember like where my daddy at. Like
it.
like I remember that too. My dad, like
Yeah.
I said, he would come through when he would and stuff like that. But like, yeah, it
Mm,
was you started to feel yourself.
right.
You started to lift some weights and like you could tell me what to do, mama. And my mom was like, yeah, I can tell you what to do. Some of these women don't have that. You know what I'm saying?
Mm,
And
yeah.
it's not a knock to them. They're trying. But if you like this wasn't even a mentoring thing. A friend, a young woman I knew adopted a young man from Africa. He was like a kid, and then came to me like, Corey, can you take so and so to the barbershop? I'm like, why would you? Are you afraid to go to the barbershop in Houston? Like, what do you like? Why would you adopt a young man, from
Right.
Africa? Like, did you think about that? And if you did think about that, so now you're telling him that you're afraid to take him to the barbershop. What do you think is gonna happen? Like, we gonna get you? Like, make it make sense to me. Like, and so and that's one conversation I had with a young woman too. Like, y'all, I'm not here to judge these women. Like, that's not my energy. But I had to, have a conversation with a woman one time when I'm like, look, maybe some of the choices you've made have led to this situation. I'm here to mentor your son. Like, I'm not that type of psychologist. So yeah, like, sometimes it just, I try to like not involve myself with the mothers
Oh,
unless
I see.
yeah, I
That's
don't
necessary.
really.
Yeah. I
Yeah, I try
understand.
to keep a wall between that.
Gotcha. Well, you mentioned that also in the article, to mentor young black men effectively, one must be able to hold the weight of his pain in one hand and the magnitude of his inheritance in the other. So what do you mean by that? And also how does mentorship serve as a substitute for the cultural inheritance when traditional community structures aren't present?
Yeah. I think for me, that mentorship becomes like the sort of living example of identity. I present myself. And yes, like I'm going to toot my own horn. I'm Dr. Clay. I'm a U.S. Army veteran. I also have no children. I'm financially stable enough to where I can move to London for a year, come back to Seattle, do things like that. And I'm not wealthy, but I'm okay. And so I'm not just like talking smoke. I'm like, if you do X and Y and Z, you will be successful. I'm gonna give you a roadmap. And so I
Mm,
think a mentor is not just there to give you advice. You need to there's no reason for me to be out there talking to young men if I don't got my stuff together. You know what I'm saying? And so
right.
that's the one thing, like
Absolutely.
trying to provide that and try to provide that confidence and that stability. And what is it being grounded look like? If I'm going to say I'm going to be here for you at 3 p.m. every Friday at the coffee shop, I'm going to be here at 3 p.m. What time are you going to get here? 3 p.m. Like, no, you'll be here at 2:50. It's telling young men that, and for the first time, I'm like, oh, like, yeah, don't get to someplace on time. You better get here early. So I think it's that cultural inheritance for me of like showing up, being there on time, being professional, but then if you're there, like, tell me what's up. Let me know what's going on. I think it accelerates a sort of cultural fluency and self-understanding because I think mentors, my main goal is to help young men make sense of experience they have yet to process. Like that racism you dealt with, you haven't processed that. Let me tell you what that's
Mhm.
really about. Let me talk to you about what's going on with that old lady. And also talk to her and talk to him in a way that's like that. I'm in my late 40s, and that was somebody's grandma, but that woman's not much older than me. And she told you that that was racism. That let's not, she was born, I was born in the 70s, she was born in the 60s. So we're not that far apart. That's just so racist. Don't worry about it, and trying to let them know like you need to process this, but understand that you're going to deal with this again. You better have to process it now. And so trying to provide language, context, history, and then turn that sort of confusion and that trauma into clarity. Like, look, you dealt with this. Next time, like, and I hate to say this, next time maybe reach out to your friends. Hey, is your grandma cool with me coming there? Don't just show up like, hey, because everybody
Mm,
ain't gonna be cool with you. But I think providing that, to answer your question, that providing that consistency where a lot of the systems that we have don't, the school system doesn't, certain neighborhoods might not, but basically like creating that shift and giving you tools to basically understand like the culture that you inherit is being a black man in America. Um, and traditional structures have never really supported us. We've always had to support each other. Um, and sadly, I see less and less of that. Like, I know there are a couple of mentorship areas in Seattle, but to be quite honest, I do this on my own. I don't
mhm,
get paid for this, but there aren't that many. There are some programs out there, but there's a definite need for this as well. And so over time, I think, trying to just build a foundation of who are you going to be as a young man, create that roadmap, come up with a game plan. What do you want to do? Also, what are your strengths and weaknesses? You want to be a lawyer? I'm like, why? Lawyers make a lot of money. I'm like, yeah, so do engineers. Like, what do you really want to
mhm.
do? But also, like, I've had some young man do like the strength and weaknesses test. And I had a young man the other day, he signed up for library school. Yeah, I was like, cool. That's what you want. Like, he's like, that's what I want to do. I'm like, that's
Wow,
awesome.
that's great.
That's a detour because there are only like I think 500 black male librarians. But I'm like, yeah, that's cool. Be esoteric. Think outside the box. Do some. Also, don't do anything that's not going to give you any type of return on investment. So just basically that cultural inheritance is just like setting up like a game plan and under like letting young men know who you are and what this country can do for you. I left
Mhm.
this country twice. I went to Canada, I went to London. I still came back
Right.
because wherever I go, my culture is still going to come with me. And just let him know the same thing. And just, yeah, I think that roadmap is key for many of them because a lot of them don't have that.
And I know we're talking, I just find it so shocking. I mean, I think a lot of times people like kids will get passed over, or I mean, and I'm really thinking the East Coast, passed over or not seen as someone that is can be overlooked when they have behavioral issues,
Mm,
or they're just, or either they have learning disabilities, and I mean, and that's kind of the big thing, learning disabilities, or they're acting out. But and you could help me with this, but the kids seem like just normal kids, but yet just because they happen to have maybe their skin's a little darker, or even, you know, their hair, or just their feet, and it's got to be their features that's precluding them just to being seen.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I've talked to some teachers before too that, you know, would expel or, you know, I don't feel safe around so and so. I'm like, well, you know, why? Like, I mean, that's you. And I dealt with a lot of this in Portland, where the one thing about the Pacific Northwest that really upsets me is that many of the white people have been taught to be colorblind, to like, you know, I don't see race. I'm like, that's so detrimental. Like you see
Mhm.
him because the way you act towards him, do not like you know, dehumanize him by like, you know, when you see me, I asked this one, what do you see me when you see me, Miss So and so? You're bald. I'm like, you can't even say black. Just big,
Can't even say,
big bald.
can't even say it. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, and that does not help the situation. If you're scared of one of your students because of that, now if the student did something, that's another thing. But I've dealt with some teachers too that, or some other people like, yeah, like, oh, you know, I didn't want to talk to so and so because I was afraid. I'm like, did he give a history of lashing out? Like, deal with your stuff. And there are so many people in the industry of mentoring or teaching that haven't dealt with their own stuff. And I'm saying that as a psychologist, to where, why are you here in the first place? If you're here because you don't have a passion for this, and you don't need to be here. I can't tell you what to do, but you know, get out of the classroom, because whatever you're doing is going to be detrimental. When you accuse this young man of being aggressive, you know, and he didn't really do anything different than the other students, you put a target on his back for the rest of his, at least his academic career.
So the teachers, administrators are just, they totally ignore the other side of their family. So they just totally disregard it. So that's not even important. The
Yeah,
fact that
they
they
don't.
have, you
Yeah,
know, because the white moms, or I can't say, or white dads, they're there. So they're there. They're the ones that are present, but
yeah.
they completely disregard that aspect.
Yeah, it's something that they've never had the tools to work with, so they don't have the cultural competency to deal with it.
Wow. Yeah, totally blows my mind. So um for those that have kind of learned that they're black later in life, so kind of that delayed realization, does that affect the young man differently? So if they're in the more teenage 16, 17 range basis, maybe 12, 13, have you seen that that's been more detrimental?
Yeah, because when it happens, it's a psychological shift, not just like a realization. For someone like us, like always identified as African American, it's a constant. Like I remember, like in kindergarten, when the kid shoved me, and yet I got in trouble. And my mom had to get involved, and I'm just like, well, why? And like, explain to me why I got in trouble. You know, like even at 5 or 6, like my mom's asking this teacher, like, can you explain? And she had no explanation. But I think for others, that moment when some of these young men, when race becomes relevant, it's often through a negative social interaction. And I think for most of them, from what I have experienced, that shift is disorienting. They're like, well, wait a minute, you know, I thought I was, you know, like everybody else, and
Yes.
that's not the case. And yeah, it does trigger that confusion and that grief, and a lot of times that anger, realizing that the world sees you differently than what you saw yourself. That can be jarring. Like, I thought I was, you know, like Dev, like the young, like I thought I was like Dev, and like, no, you're Dev, but you're also Dev, and you're black, even though you're biracial. And it's just like, and once again, it's something I've never dealt with, but I've seen so much of it. And I know that's conjecture, but out of about the 50 men I've mentored, about 30-ish have been like biracial. And like I said, as soon as I came here and got to the college I worked with in Portland, like there it was. And it was the same thing. So like, okay, this is a pattern that I'm seeing
Mhm.
here. Um, but yeah, it can bring up questions of belonging, you know, fairness, everything that anybody else would deal with, but they're just realizing it in a different way, because they, even those young men, don't have that cultural competency. Because, and once again, some of these white mothers have done an amazing job, but they still can only do so much.
Right.
You know, there's not, you know, they don't have the same lived experience as we do. So
And,
what I've realized, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
and churches or anything, no churches or anything have seen it as a problem to address
No,
in the community.
no, no, because this is the Pacific Northwest. So once again, we don't see color up here. So,
There's
so yeah,
not enough churches. Or
yeah.
not the one Baptist church. That would
Yeah,
be
yeah,
it.
yeah,
That would
exactly.
be
The one
necessary.
Baptist church with the preacher. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
so.
I got you. I
But
got it.
what it does, Keith, like from what I've observed and researched and just seen over the past several years, is that it leads for most of these young men to this like accelerated identity search. So they go from zero to Malcolm X real quick. So
Yeah.
that's like a good thing. But they go and like, I'm gonna show you this book. One of them bought me because they didn't want me the comic books. He bought me this Malcolm X. I'm sorry, Nat Turner. Uh, he gave this to me the other day. One of the young men. I'm like, that's awesome. So like he didn't even hear about Nat Turner. So like
Mm,
just so that accelerated. Like I I'm black now. I have to really be black. And so it is like, and I think once that awareness hits, it seems like for many of them, it's like a need to catch up. Like I said, you go from zero to now
mm.
you're in the Black Panther Party. Like, hold up, let's you skipped a
Right.
couple steps. Let's just and so yeah, I think that's that learning you're black. I think it can cause this like psychological shift, but I've had to like and not I'm proud of the Black Panther Party, but I think some of them go some of the young men I've dealt with, I'm like, you don't have to prove anything to me, but yeah, let's do this in steps. You don't have to go from zero to Jesse Jackson automatically.
Mm-hmm. So I guess as we get close to the end, what are some of the immersion program or immersion things that you give the young man to help them kind of explore or understand their identity?
The number one thing, and I hate to say this, is not hate to say, but literacy. I do use a lot of graphic novels because that's the one thing that when it comes to the data, only about 10 to 19% of Black eighth grade males are reading above a proficiency level. And that's something that's near and dear to my heart.
Mm,
So even many of the ones that I do, come into my purview are the reason they're academic issues as well. And it's the literacy rate. Many of them can read, but they're reading at such a poor level. And that's number one. Like if you can't
oh, wow.
read, and this is once again, this is the Seattle or Portland School District. And I've had some really tough conversations like, why is he reading at like a fourth grade level? And
Mm,
he's in the ninth grade, and a lot of it's not even the social promotion, it's just that they read enough to get through.
get by,
And
yeah.
so yeah, I'm still an academic and I use
And
a
you don't
lot
have
of
to read nowadays. You can that's
yeah,
you can hear everything.
yeah, and the screen time and the scrolling, it's really causing an effect, and I think it's going to be highly detrimental for us in the future. So that's the number one thing, literacy. I focus on that, and number two is I create consistent, visible, creating a consistent, visible Black presence. But like I said before, I'm going to be here with you for 6 months, and then at that point, if we've gotten to a place to where you're good to go, uh, I can't be with you forever. And that's not just with young biracial. I do that with everybody I mentor. I've
Mhm.
mentored young men at the University of Washington. Like, look, I got you this quarter, but next quarter, Dr. Clay's got to go teach it. You know what I'm saying? It's because
Mhm.
it becomes almost a crutch in a lot of ways. I'm
Mm,
going to give you the tools, maybe not to succeed, but I'm going to help you get some wings so you can fly. Um, so yeah, I think that representation has to be regular and has to be present. It's just like any other teacher or mentor. You're with the teacher for like a year and then you move on. I'm doing the same thing, but I'm also realizing too that that can cause a lot of hurt feelings sometimes. And I've told a lot of there was a young man that reached out to me a couple weeks ago who I mentored in 2014. And, yo, like, should I go to grad school? I'm like, who are you? Like I mentored you, like and then I remembered him, like, oh yeah, I remember you from like Portland. Like that's been 13 years ago. He's like, yeah, man, go to grad school. I don't mind talking to you like that, but I'm not, he's like, and then he sent some other messages like, yeah, once you left and moved. I'm like, it's not me being heartless. I'm gonna listen to you and talk to you, but
mhm.
there's some other stuff you probably need to deal with as a man that probably needs some I would say mental health or that they're, like I can't do that for you. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? So, but I'm
Right.
gonna give you some tools. And then the final thing is that we have to design environments, not just moments. And I
Mm,
even fought myself on that. Like, I think having one-off events are powerful, but they're not always transformational. Like even the other day, I wrote about how, a lot of diversity efforts have failed. That's because we had certain elements of like one-off events and this and that. But when you have the American with Disabilities Act, like, yo, you're gonna do X, Y, Z and make this long lasting. We're going to put ramps here. When we had Title IX, we're going to do X, Y, Z and build stuff in. If you don't build in any type of sort of capacity with these young men psychologically, and create some sort of like reinforcement mechanism, like I tell them, like get up in the morning, try to do 100 sit-ups and try to do 100 push-ups. That might seem like what? That's like something from the military. Yeah, but it's creating a consistency that's going to last with you. Um, and so, yeah, I think the literacy, the consistency, and like I said, designing for the long term. Like I still get up in the morning to this day and do my 100 sit-ups and my 100 push-ups. I don't do them as fast as I used to,
mm,
but
okay.
it's something that I think has built a consistency in me. And I teach this
Right.
to young men, like, yeah, you can do that, and they appreciate that. And I think that's the main thing is like trying to build in consistency, or just not create moments to where, yeah, I had Dr. Corey for 6 weeks. I'm like, yeah, but I'm like, but when you leave here, you're gonna do X, you're gonna do Y, you're gonna still get up
Right.
and do your push-ups. Like I ain't trying to talk about eating your Wheaties and your take your vitamins, but in a way that psychological consistency comes from a lot of physical things that you do as well. And I try to build that into young men. I do get that from the military. Not everybody has that military mindset, but I'm trying to give you some sort of tools to at least try to toughen you up in many ways. Because I've dealt
Mhm.
with a lot of young men who are also not tough because once again they've been raised by a single mother, and that's not to knock the mothers. It's just that, yeah, I believe in like uncles beating you up every once in a while. You know
Mhm.
what I'm saying? Like
Yeah,
not
they
like
just
it's
didn't
some,
have that side. They only had one
yeah,
side. Yeah.
yeah,
And that's even if, flip it, the dad may be nurturing and the mom's tough, but they,
exactly,
so
yeah.
that kind of thing. Well, this was great stuff. I have to say, this was very enlightening, and I was glad that I happened to see the article, and I was like, this is just things that we just don't, just in the Black community, we may overlook because we feel um, a certain way. So I was very appreciative of you being on today. So I always like to end with this question. It's always a surprise. And because you're living in a different perspective, you definitely have a great response. But we're always doing, like, you're doing a lot of work for others and helping and supporting people who may not always think of ourselves. So as a Black man, how are you feeling?
Oh, I feel good. I'm all about the self-care, Keith.
Okay.
Like, yeah, I just got back.
Well, I mean, look,
Like,
you doing 100 push-ups and 100 sit-ups. That's some self-care. You know what I
well, I
mean?
mean, you mentioned my
At least
shirt.
I
I'm
know
a
you. At
very,
least I know you're healthy.
yeah. But I'm also a very bougie brother. Like I had the
Yeah.
pedicure today. We're
All
going to
right.
the island, going to get a massage tomorrow with
Nice.
the wife. And so like, yeah, I'm a big fan of that self-care.
Okay.
But it might not like, some of those things, cost money, but a lot of my self-care comes from a lot of just like taking time to give yourself space. Like I like to get up in the morning, go to the coffee shop and read, and that's self-care to me because it keeps me abreast of things. But I'm having just gotten back from London, I'm doing amazing. And maybe that's something else we could probably talk about. Like, yeah, because London was interesting. But now that I'm back, I'm like, I think I made the right choice.
Yeah.
but I'm happy and I'm settled and I am happy to be back because I still get to mentor and work with young men. But yeah, brother's ready for a massage tomorrow. So
I
I'm
hear
good to
you.
go.
I hear you. Well, thank you. And just as we close out, just give me a few minutes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, yes, truly fascinating, great opportunity just to hear a different side of Black men, biracial Black men, and the challenges that they may go through, and the support that a beautiful person like Dr. Clay is doing for them. And And the reason why I mention it is because, think about it. We think of outwardly that if a certain person is a certain skin color or hair color, or how they look, that they may have it better than us, and that may not necessarily be the case. So to just support them and see them for who they are, and ask them how they're doing. So this is Keith Dent from the Black Men Speak podcast. Peace.